city, the Chinese were able to pin them down long enough for reinforcements to arrive and encircle them. The Chinese then cut Japanese supply lines, provoking retreat and Chinese pursuit. 128, 129. During the battle, Japan used chemical weapons. 130, Burma 1942-1943. In the aftermath of the Japanese conquest of Burma, there was widespread disorder and pro-independence agitation in eastern India and a disastrous famine in Bengal, causing up to 3 million deaths. Wavell, Commander-in-Chief in India, was nevertheless eager to mount counter-attacks into Burma. One attack was an offensive in Arakan intended to secure Akib Island, important for its port and airfield. The 14th Indian Infantry Division advanced overland down the Main Peninsula. The offensive was stalled at Rapidon and Dombek, only a few miles north, by numerically inferior Japanese forces who occupied almost impregnable bunkers. Repeated assaults, from January to March 1943, failed to overcome these. Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek and General Joseph Stilwell, Allied Commander-in-Chief in the China Theatre from 1942 to 1945. Positions. 131, a Japanese division moved to Arakan from central Burma and attacked the 14th Indian Division's exposed left flank. The headquarters of the 26th Indian Infantry Division took over the front, and intended to mount a riposte. However, the exhausted and demoralized troops which it inherited failed to stand firm and the division was forced to fall back to the Indian frontier in the first week in May. Most officers accepted that the fiasco resulted from inadequate training for jungle warfare. 132. To offset the depressing results of the Arakan offensive, the Allies widely publicized a long-distance raid mounted by the Chindits under Brigadier Ord Charles Wingate. The Chindits suffered heavy losses, 1,138 out of a force of just over 3,000, and had inflicted only minor damage to the Japanese lines of communication. However, Wingate insisted that ordinary British and Indian troops could fight in the jungle as easily as Japanese. The raid also contributed to the Japanese decision to invade India during 1944. In August 1943, the Allies formed a new Southeast Asia Command, SEAC, to take over strategic responsibilities for Burma and India from the India Command. In October 1943, Winston Churchill appointed Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten as its supreme commander. Wavell was appointed Viceroy of India and immediately took measures to address famine in Bengal. General Claude Auchinleck became Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army and revitalized its administration and training establishments. 133. The British and Indian 14th Army was formed to face the Japanese in Burma. Under Lieutenant General William Slim, its training, morale and health greatly improved. The American General Joseph Stilwell, who commanded U.S. forces in the China-Burma-India theater, directed aid to China and prepared to construct the leader road to link India and China. In 1943, the Thai Fire Army invasion headed to Xishuangbanna in China, but were driven back by the Chinese Expeditionary Force. Allied offensives, 1943-44. Allied attack routes against the Empire of Japan Midway proved to be the last great naval battle for Toyas. The U.S. used the ensuing period to turn its vast industrial potential into increased numbers of ships, planes, and trained aircrew. 134. At the same time, Japan, lacking an adequate industrial base or technological strategy, a good aircrew training program, or adequate naval resources and commerce defense, fell further and further behind. In strategic terms, the Allies began a long movement across the Pacific, seizing one island base after another. Some Japanese strongholds like Truk, Rabaul, and Formosa were neutralized by air attack and bypassed. The goal was to get close to Japan itself, then launch massive strategic air attacks, improve the submarine blockade and finally, only if necessary, execute an invasion. The US Navy did not seek out the Japanese fleet for a decisive battle, as Mahanian doctrine would suggest, and as Japan hoped. The Allied advance could only be stopped by a Japanese naval attack, which oil shortages, induced by submarine attack, made impossible. 78, 135, Allied offensives on New Guinea and up the Solomons. American forces landing at Wendover Island. June 1943. In the southwestern Pacific, the Allies seized the strategic initiative for the first time during the war, and in June 1943, launched Operation Cartwheel, a series of amphibious invasions to recapture the Solomon Islands and New Guinea and ultimately isolate the major Japanese forward base at Rabaul. Following the Japanese invasion of Soleil-Morley in March 1942, Cartwheel began with Soleil-Morley campaign in northern New Guinea in April 1943, which was followed in June to October by the New Georgia campaign, in which the Allies used the landings on Wendover Drive on Munda Point and Battle of Munda Point to secure a secretly constructed Japanese airfield at Munda and the rest of New Georgia Islands Group. Landings from September until December secured the Treasury Islands and landed Allied troops on Choiseul, Bougainville and Cape Gloucester. These landings prepared the way for Nimitz island hopping campaign towards Japan. Invasion of the Gilbert and Marshall Islands. In November 1943, U.S. Marines sustained high casualties when they overwhelmed the 4,500-strong garrison at Tarawa. This helped the Allies to improve the techniques of amphibious landings, implementing changes such as thorough preemptive bombings and bombardment, more careful planning regarding tie-designed landing schedules, and better coordination. Operations on the Gilberts were followed in late January and mid-February 1944 by further, less costly, landings on the Marshall Islands. Cairo Conference. The Allied leaders of the Asian and Pacific theaters, Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Winston Churchill meeting at the Cairo Conference in 1943 on the 22nd of November, 1943. U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and ROC Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, met in Cairo, Egypt, to discuss a strategy to defeat Japan. The meeting was also known as the Cairo Conference and concluded with the Cairo Declaration. Submarine warfare. U.S. submarines, as well as some British and Dutch vessels operating from bases at Cavite in the Philippines, 1941-42, Fremantle and Brisbane, Australia, Pearl Harbor, Trincomalee, Ceylon, Midway, and later Guam, played a major role in defeating Japan, even though submarines made up a small proportion of the Allied navies, less than 2% in the case of the U.S. Navy. 135, 136, submarines strangled Japan by sinking its merchant.
Yes, I have the early evening news in few minutes. 6:30. So I will take a break. I will make a short Danish video. It's still very hot, but now the sun is getting down. So I will take a break, half an hour. It's still 30. Still very hot. But I will take a break, make a short Danish video. Then I will charge my camcorder.